to day 3 of this course. You may notice something right off the bat that's a little bit different about today's lesson. You only have one thing to do, and it's to learn these vocabulary words. But today is important. I have something very, very important to mention about this, okay? So we have 15 verbs here, but these verbs or action words are very important. In fact, I would say they're vital. They're vital. They are key to you speaking Spanish fast. Why are they so important? One, they're very common words. All right, we can look at the meanings in English. To be could also, in English, it'd be like I am, she is, we are, he wants to be, things like that. Very important. To do, to make, can, to think, to put, stuff like that. Okay, we see these are common words. That's one reason, but not the only reason. It gets a little bit more interesting. So do you remember in day 2 I mentioned that we have your 3 best friends, which is hablar, comer, vivir, the words to speak, to eat, to live, and those we're going to set a pattern for many Spanish verbs. But I did make a brief mention that not all Spanish verbs would follow those same patterns exactly. Some verbs would just be very similar. Now, I don't want you to feel overwhelmed about this concept. You don't have to worry too much about it. In fact, this is the exact reason that I've handpicked these 15 irregular verbs. That's what they're called, irregular verbs, because they don't follow the same pattern exactly. They'll be very similar most of the time, but they don't follow the pattern exactly. And these are going to be key because these are going to be your most common ones, okay? And another thing about irregular verbs, to not make you feel too overwhelmed, is they, like I said, they're similar. They're going to follow similar patterns, and plus you're going to hear them all the time because most irregular verbs, not all of them, but most of them are just so common. You hear them used all the time, and it's really easy to just know what sounds right. But again, the reason why I've handpicked specifically these 15, probably the most common irregular verbs, is so you can start to memorize the patterns. You'll see how they're pretty similar. You'll be able to use them immediately, and that's the biggest thing. Most people that are learning Spanish, they don't actually learn how to conjugate these within a year or two, but you're going to be using them and learning their conjugations in the first few weeks, and you're going to hit the ground running with your Spanish conjugation, so to speak. So the way that this book is outlined, whenever one day you'll look back at it and you'll say, that makes sense. It makes sense why I was practicing with these 15 key irregular verbs. Okay, so there's not too much more to say about these words as a generalization as we are zoomed out on them, but let's go ahead and just talk about a few things here that could be useful. Notice the first 2 words, estar and ser. In English, they both mean to be. Oh, what is that about? Well, there's a brief explanation there. The first one says a temporary state or something temporary. The one below says in a permanent state. So just kind of as a generalization, here's what happens. So in Spanish, they basically have 2 words that mean to be, but one of them you'd use for things that are kind of temporary, that could change on a regular basis or change easily, and then the other one would be things that are more permanent. So as just a generalization, here's an idea. If a person is frustrated or happy, that tends to be a temporary thing, because you're normally talking about how they are in the moment. Oh yeah, he's frustrated today. That's temporary. But if you say he's a doctor, that's generally viewed as being something permanent. Now we know it doesn't necessarily mean it has to be permanent, right? Because a person could lose their doctor's license. But as a generalization, it's part of their identity. It's who they are. It's viewed as something more permanent. So yeah, there are some little nuance, maybe exceptions, and or things that you could say, well, that doesn't always have to be temporary or permanent. Well, okay, yeah, we get that, but as a generalization, you're mostly going to be looking at whether something is temporary or permanent. Okay, don't get too worried about these. Just get out there and get immersion. That's where the real magic with these words is going to happen, because you're going to start to notice, oh, they used that word because, oh yeah, that's permanent. Okay, and before you know it, in a few months, you're gonna know which one to pick right off the bat. Okay. Below that, the word hacer means to do or to make. You'll just hear in context that it just often they just use that for both of those words. There are some more specific words you could use sometimes, like for making something. Sometimes in Spanish they would use a word like create or design, but those are a little bit more specific. But as a generalization, hacer usually is the word you'll use if you want to say to do or to make. Another thing I want to mention too, notice you have lots of cognates here, lots of cognates, even if it's just parts of a word. Take a close look at those. I don't want to talk too much on this because it is a pretty simple lesson, but let me see if there's anything else that I want to say. Okay, let's look at the words to know. So down further we have the words conocer and saber. They both mean to know. Again, don't get too worried about this. I know it's a little bit foreign to you that there's two ways to say no, but here's the simple breakdown. Conocer usually is talking about things to be familiar with. If you are familiar with a city because you've been there, you would say, like, I know that city, I'm familiar with it. And that's kind of another way to say, like, even in Spanish, they would say that you've been there, you know it. If you're familiar with a person, I know that person. If you're familiar with anything that you could be more familiar with, it's almost like you have experience with, you have a relationship with, so look at it that way. The word saber means to know as well, but it's more of like knowing facts and information. Like it's in your head. It's just there, and it's almost like you can robotically recall it. Okay, so that's just a general idea. We could talk longer about it, but don't get too wrapped up about it. Again, the real magic isn't gonna happen with you trying to memorize everything that you can read about the difference between these two words. The magic, so to speak, sorry for lack of a better word, but anyways, the real magic is going to happen when you're getting immersion. Okay, the real progress, we should say, the real progress, the real really committing something to memory, and like these little subtle nuances, you're gonna internalize them more with immersion than anything else. Okay, you're just gonna learn how to use them. Let's see if there's anything else. Yeah, I don't think there's anything else too much that I want to say. I guess last thing I will say is the word ir is a weird looking word. It's two letters, IR. Some Spanish people might roll that ending R a little bit more, like I mentioned in one video. Ir. You guys have variations you hear from native speakers. It's a little bit of a weird word. I'll say this word, not only does it look weird because it's IR, but it's also gonna be the toughest word to conjugate. It's literally, I'm not the only person that's saying that, is the toughest word to conjugate. It's a really weird word, but you're gonna have fun with it. And I'll tell you why. Because you use the word to go all the time. You either use it, you hear it. It's really gonna be a great example of what I mean by you're going to learn these irregularities with immersion. And ir is like the most irregular verb. It's the most rebellious verb that could be in Spanish, basically, and it's just a weird one. But as you see how fast you start to learn the word ir, because it's so common, it's going to give you the confidence of knowing, oh yeah, I'm going to keep learning Spanish. I'm going to do this, because if this is the most difficult one, you're going to see how your brain just absorbs while you're in immersion. It's going to absorb all of the other irregularities with these verbs. Okay, but again, we are going to be doing lessons with these ones. I think I mentioned that. And It's going to give you a good working vocabulary. These are very common words, and you're going to be speaking Spanish faster than other people who follow other methods and other courses. I can promise you that. But again, make sure that you're getting more immersion than time that you're spending studying this book. This book is just a small portion guiding you in the way that you should go with your Spanish, but all the real progress, all the beauty and the awesome things all the awesome progress you're going to see with your Spanish is going to happen in immersion. If you have any questions, let me know. I'll see you in the next one.